Okay, so hello everyone, and welcome back to We Love PMO, the show where we simplify the complex world of project, program, and PMO management. I am your host, Sarah, and if this is your first time tuning in, welcome. Don't forget to hit that follow or subscribe button so you don't miss any notifications for when a new episode is released. And today we are welcoming back a previous guest, Bernadette Barber of Zero2Projects. And today we're going to be having just a short discussion on the importance of soft skills in project management. So thanks, Bernadette, for joining us again. It's always a pleasure to have you on here.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to start by talking about how communication is really key to success, and it's such a vital soft skill for anyone that's looking either to get in the field of project management or currently working in project management. And for me, having that like effective communication just ensures that everyone understands what's going on and
Yeah,
everyone has the same understanding of what the project objectives are and what their roles are, and it
yeah,
just kind of reduces those misunderstandings and making sure that everybody is in alignment before they've completely got off
yeah,
from the start line.
yeah, yeah.
um so like what do you think of like some of those like common kind of communication pitfalls that you've seen sort of time and time again? Because I know I've seen a few, but I'd be interested to hear your
Oh,
thoughts as
well,
well.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you and I, obviously, we know each other well now, and we spoke a lot about soft skills within project management. I like to call them essential skills in project management. Um, Communication, I don't think is a soft skill. I think it's an absolute must in any role in business. You have to be a good communicator, and you hear a lot of and see a lot of noise on social media and in different blogs and things about you have to have communication skills, you have to be a good leader, you have to be able to manage conflict. But we're very much about the how. So if you don't feel that you're a good communicator, how do you get from where you are to where you need to be? And what is the impact of that, particularly in project management? So if you break it down into the categories of uh, verbal communication, written communication, and non-verbal communication. So verbal communication, I mean, it takes all sorts of forms. And I I've sat back in my early career and I watched a lot of people and I witnessed a lot of people that were very good communicators and some that weren't so good. And the difference in the outcome is palatable in terms of making sure everybody's on the same page, that you've got the team with you. But I think for individuals, it gives you a huge credibility. It gives you a
Absolutely.
phenomenal credibility. You could have a CV that stretches out for years, you've got accreditations, you've got experience, but if you can't communicate and be articulate, but you also have to have gravitas in your communication. So, as a project manager, if you're, for example, showing up to facilitate a workshop, people have to know you've entered the room. People have to know that you're in there and you're in charge of this whole proceeding. So you have to have that confidence. And I'm a big believer that people should learn facilitation skills as a project manager, which is we could talk about that as a different subject because I think it's a really good thing to learn. Um, so I think verbal communication, if I can start on that, Sarah, is a really good balance between not being incredibly abrupt and straight as opposed to masses and masses of words. And people use 3,000 words where 15 would do. So it's that kind
Yeah.
of thing because you lose your audience. You 100% lose your audience. So my approach is to go. I'm quite a direct person anyway. It's my Yorkshire roots, but I am quite direct in so much as I get a point across. But I'm very empathic. I look after my teams. I'm not direct and broad, but people get the message fairly quickly. And I'm very adapt. And this is what we kind of teach people is how to deliver bad news. So
Mm.
part of communication isn't just delivering the good news. You've got to deliver bad news to stakeholders and bad news to your team and your subordinates. So it's how do you do that? And my approach is a really get it out on the table, but I've always got options. So the bad news is, but this is what we can do, and this is how we're going to address it. So I think the verbal communication it's individual styles. It's definitely individual styles, but you really have to learn to be articulate and concise and say what you need to say in a time frame, because you will lose your audience. And I would encourage people as well to go and find apps out there that teach you how to do this. I mentioned earlier, I'm a big believer in how. You're telling me I need to be a good communicator, but how do I do that? So on the Headway app, there's a program. I've not actually ran it, so I don't know if it's good, but it looks interesting, called How to Talk Like a CEO. So things like that will be interesting for people. And I think it'd be useful to for people to go on to like communication workshops, so you can see people's live communication skills, and you can refine and correct. So I think verbal communication is absolutely key. And then if you look at written communications, one of the things that we teach is people how to write concise documents. So it's really critical in project management. So if let's take a scoping document, let's say if you're developing a PID or something in initiation, if you're vague or ambiguous in what you've written down, your stakeholders will be unclear. They'll have varying views of what you're delivering. Your team will be unclear. The business will be unclear. And I've done a lot of coaching, mentoring workshops for people to write documentation, and you can see how ambiguous the documentation can be. So if you have a line of scope that says we are upgrading, I don't know, 10,000 laptops from Windows 10 to Windows 11, it's like, that's not enough. There's probably 5 paragraphs under that. And I always teach people when they're writing documents to say, put the statement in, and underneath always 2 words, and the words are which means. This is a scope, which means this is the country we're going into, this is the amount of machines, this is the impacts we're going to have, this is the approach we're going to have. So really, really make sure nobody's under any illusion about what you're delivering. So written communications, you can really teach that. I think you can teach that better than verbal. I think you can teach that. I think verbal.
I agree with you there. That's sometimes it's like a trait that you're kind of some are like characteristics, aren't they? Work that you're kind of they're ingrained in you, and maybe the way that you've been conditioned as well, and maybe the way that you've lived sort of experiences. The written, I agree with you, is something that you could teach a bit easier than the verbal. And what you were saying there as well, just at the start, about when you enter the room and needing to make sure people know that you are the project manager, and we don't call it directing the project for anything. We need to be seen as that person that is giving those directions, and that you are leading it. And I think the facilitation, that's a really, really key sort of skill, definitely, especially when you're working with a number of stakeholders. And especially if you've got that kind of like, you've got a group of key stakeholders, and maybe there's a bit of kind of argy-bargy with some of them already. Some are kind of more in that kind of camp where they're really sold on it, but some still, they're going to be the one that's always going to be throwing that curveball to you. So if you're really ambiguous with what you're saying, you're not clear, they're going to be the ones that pick you up in there and make it a really difficult sort of situation. And also with communication, I think it's really important to have that transparency, making sure that you're communicating verbally, but also in documentation, so you've got that audit trail about the project's progress, good and bad. If things are going off track, don't kind of hide it. Make sure it's kind of shared out there. And with what you're saying about the documents as well, it's such a, especially like the business case or the scoping document, it's such, it's the foundation, of what other stuff is built up on. And some things that I've come across so many times when undertaking project health checks from a sort of PMO perspective, and we're kind of going through a lot of the documents,
Yeah.
is in the business case, quite often the scope's not clear, or the scope is
No.
completely different
No.
across a number of documents.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we have to make sure it's a live document that you need to keep coming back to. But quite often the acceptance and the quality criteria is missing. And that's kind of like
Yeah.
if you're developing a
Mm,
product, you need to know
mhm,
from your requirement gathering, what are
mm,
those? So that when you
mm,
come to launch, you can go back and go, yep,
mm.
check, check, check. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
documentation is such a
I, do
key
you know what?
part to get right
I
from
would, I
communicating.
would go as far as to say that it will differentiate you as a project manager, and it will differentiate how smoothly and the quality of your project will go. It's absolutely critical to get everybody on the same page. And then the precursor to that, which is completely another podcast, is questioning skills.
Yeah,
Because to get the document, you have to be good, you have to be curious, you have to have a mind that doesn't take assumptions. And so it's absolutely critical, I think. And I think, because I want to talk about non-verbal as well, non-verbal communications.
yeah,
But I think you've also got a big part of communication is not talking. A big part of communication is listening.
listening,
So,
definitely.
in a previous life, I used to run project management assessment centres for us to recruit into our teams. And one of the assessment pieces was a group exercise. So all the others were individual project managers writing or assessing a PID and telling me what's wrong with it and all this kind of stuff. So it was interesting because we'd put project managers into groups of 6 and we gave them a team exercise. And it was nothing to do with project management. It was something like you've landed on the moon and all you've got is a piece of string, or one of those things. And it was interesting. And what we were looking for within that group was who sat back and absorbed and listened to all the other project managers. There was quite an overwhelming tendency for people to think, I'm being assessed, I need to step up and show that I'm a leader and I am a manager. So you'd get this burst of, okay, I think I've got the answer. I think what we'll do, somebody gets up and gets on a flip chart, I'm going to XYZ ABC. And the ones that come across as the most credible and powerful is to sit back and they're writing notes, listening, and then towards the end of this, they come out with some amazing questions that have never been asked, and they come out with a really good solution. And I do that in a lot of meetings. Just because you're the lead and you're the manager, you don't have to talk. Get everybody speaking. I sit back and I'll listen, especially if there's conflicts. I will sit and listen to it. I won't let it go out of control, but I'll sit and listen, or if it's an ideas or a scoping workshop, just sit back. So listening is a big, big part of it. And I think some people don't
Definitely.
appreciate that.
Yeah, and also that active listening as well to sort of show, when you're sort of sitting back, especially if there's like that conflict, that you
Yeah,
are listening to both those sides,
yeah,
feeding back to them what you've heard to make sure that you've not interpreted the sort of wrong way. Um, but you're making me think there when you're talking about the project assessment centres, about scenario planning, that I've sort of been a part of in previous sort of roles in different organisations, where there's always that one person who is quite overbearing. They feel like they've kind of nominated themselves as the lead, and then they're sort of very much overcompensating and talking over people. And you're right, and quite often the ones that are the quietest there, that are taking the time, absorbing it, making sure everyone else has had a turn, not interrupting, waiting for the right moment to sort of come in and sort of, well, this is what I think, and potentially we could do this, we could do that. So, but yeah,
yeah.
listening is such a key a key
Once
skill.
you have a reputation for being that person, people invite you earlier to bring comments.
Yeah,
So once they know that you're absorbing, you're making notes, you're making judgments. I don't mean judgments in a bad way, but you're making judgments as to this is where I think it should go. People will come to you and go, What do you think? You're pretty
What do you
quiet
think to
over there.
this?
Yeah,
Yeah, what are you thinking?
yeah,
You're pulling
what
that
you thinking over
face.
there? Don't let us wait till the end. Come and tell us. But I just learn from people that are good. I have learned from people over the years that are very good communicators. I think you're a great communicator.
Oh, thank you.
I do, honestly. I think the way that you kind of articulate everything is really good. It's very clear, very calm. But it's a skill, and it comes back to what I said in the beginning, is that who teaches you that? You can teach the documentation and writing, and you can mentor people and say, send the documents and I'll tell you where I think there's ambiguity, or I will ask you the questions that maybe you haven't asked. But I think the other thing for me that's really important is non-verbal communications. Now, I think we get a little bit, and tell me if you think I'm wrong with this or you've got a different experience, but I think going into the world of remote working and collaborative tools like Teams and Zoom, I miss a lot of the non-verbal stuff that I would have picked up on. So if I'm chairing a meeting or facilitating a meeting, the first thing I do as a tactic is I sit in the middle of the room, a bit like the Prime Minister does. 10 Downing Street. So I sit in the middle of the room, I sit at the top of the table, because you are then central and you can see everybody, and you're right in the middle of the
Yeah.
the team. And then you look at again, you can get training for this, a really good little bite-sized training for people to go and have a look at. But you look at somebody who's got a frown. What, are they confused? Do they disagree with you? What's the frown? So you pick it up and you make a mental note to get to that and ask that question. And you're happy with everything. You cleared what we're saying. Give them the opportunity. What's the language saying with the person that got the arms folded? Are they
Yeah,
angry? Are
and
they
you can
bored?
pick up on the energy as well,
Yeah,
can't you, in the
yeah,
room, when you can feel the
yeah,
tension, and
yeah,
Teams, yeah, definitely gets rid of that. Also, that person that's kind of, they're fiddling with their pen an awful lot to a point
yeah,
where it's kind of broken in half, and you think, okay,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
why?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So they're writing things down and or just doodling. It's like,
yes,
are you bored? And it's kind of sending a message that I don't think I need to be in this meeting. It's a bit of a waste of time, or I don't agree with what you're saying, but I'm not going to tell you. I'm just going to sit and doodle and send a message that's a non-verbal message. So I think you really have to pick, and don't ignore those. You can't ignore those. And there's a lots of I saw a list at one point of all the different non-verbal kind of signs that you can pick up on with people. Um, and you get people that are nervous and, unsure of the footing and things like that. And you've got to pick up on that equally. And then to your
definitely.
point, you get at the other end of the scale of the disruptor.
Yeah.
The disruptor. We don't need a project management layer over this. We're quite happy to do it ourselves. It's so,
And it's trying to get to the bottom of why as well. Why are they being a disruptor? What is it?
yeah,
Like sometimes there's some sort of fear there, especially if it's like a
yeah,
change project and how that change
yeah,
may have an impact on them. But with, like you said, the ones that are a bit nervous and a bit anxious, it's trying to understand, that they may not feel have the confidence to sort of, talk in such a large group, but trying to make them feel like it is a safe space, that they're not going to be judged, or what they say is silly or
mm,
anything like that. It's just trying to help, with
mm,
your communication, making them feel like it's,
yeah,
everyone
yeah.
has got a voice and for it to be heard. I hate putting, I hate seeing people get put on the spot. That's just, I, I hate seeing that when people are really, really struggle with talking in sort of
Yeah,
large groups. So if you know that that's that person, even just having a catch up with them with a smaller group of people, just to sort of make sure they
mm,
feel they've been included in the fold.
I think so. And I think part of that process, especially when you're new into a team, if you work as an interim, for example, or you're a permanent employee and you've got new teams, is really making people feel their contribution is valuable. It's kind of your stakeholder can be the guy in the post room, or it could be the CEO. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen a, um, a person in a role that people just completely overlook as not being, that have absolutely critical information that would really drive your project potentially in a different direction. So it's making people feel, because in a project team you get hierarchies as well, don't you? So
You
you get
do,
people
yeah.
mixing with senior people they wouldn't normally mix with, so that you get that little bit of, intrepidation there as well. So I think it's all about that as well. It's but I think you have to learn from people, and I think you have to kind of just, if you do find yourself talking for 10 minutes when you could have said it in 3, is trying to find a way to do that.
Yes.
Because a lot of people won't stop you and interrupt you. They'll listen to you and then switch it off. So you've got to be very clear. I bring a lot of humour into my projects. So we just have a good, it's fun, it's good, but when it gets serious, we all know we have to, get down and
To
get
knock it
serious.
down and
Yeah, yeah. So I
sleeves
think
rolled up.
definitely, I think part of being a good communicator as well is creating a good team culture. So creating a really, really good team culture, and that is all down to communication. But going back to the beginning, Sarah, I think it's not a soft skill; it's an absolute
It's an
essential skill.
essential. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah, you have to be
And I
good.
think as part of that as well is, about messaging too, just making sure, and I know you've talked about this in some of the reels that you've done about that comms plan as well, making sure that, the messaging is correct. You are linking in with the people that need to know and be kept informed on an agreed amount of time and how they want to receive that message as well. And I think another really sort of key sort of point that sort of links into those communication skills is those negotiation skills as well.
Oh yeah, yeah,
And being
yeah.
able to sort of, you know, especially like you mentioned, if there's sometimes you're going to be in that hierarchy and having that confidence, if you're not in agreement that a certain direction is the right way to go, and that's from a more senior leader that's within your project team, actually being able to have the confidence to sort of negotiate and balance those different sort of priorities,
Mm.
particularly if we're talking about how resources are being managed within the project itself.
Yes,
um, I think those negotiation skills sometimes are really a really important skill. And again, I think it comes back to lived experience. I mean, you can get people in a room and do sort of scenarios, sort of play, sort of role play sort of situations. But I think until you're actually in that situation where you need them to negotiate, um, it's something that sort of comes with time.
mhm.
And again, I think you can look to others, and perhaps sort of shadow in a way how others would do that. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
I agree, and I think a lot of people, project managers as well, that just they get a little bit confused about the um, the ultimate aim of their project. They're not there to design the solution. They're there to interpret a business case, a strategy into a project that's got key deliverables and a plan and a resource model and a cost model. It's not their business case, it's not their strategy. They're brought in to deliver against an agreed business objective or an agreed strategy. And the design of that solution, whether it's a technical solution, will be down to architects and software developers or whoever that may be. But you are the kind of orchestrator of all that. And I think going back to negotiation, um, I always look at something, and if I'm fundamentally uncomfortable with something I'm being asked to do by a senior person or a CEO, for example, I would go back and say, we can do that, but these are the risks and this is the
Mm.
impact. If you're comfortable with that, then let's go. Because I've been driven a lot of times, and I'm sure you have, to deliver the in situations that you think
It's
it's
not,
unworkable.
yeah.
It's unworkable. So
And
okay,
you're not even going to get that minimum viable product at
no,
all either. It's
no,
going to be completely, yeah.
yeah,
Why
yeah,
why not take why not
yeah,
take that extra time? You know,
yeah, yeah,
sometimes we can be really hard on ourselves with deadlines and especially high, sort of in a senior sort of leaders, sometimes, they'll be pushing for a live date, but not understanding the groundwork or the intricacies that need to sort of happen, or the amount of involvement, like you mentioned, of like the subject matter experts in regards to the solution itself. And it's having that confidence to say, if we go that route, you're not
It's
going to
hard.
get the product you wanted. And it's hard. It's
Yeah,
really hard to do that.
it's hard for new project managers as well, because you haven't got that experience. For seasoned people that have been through it and got the scars, you can say, well, this is going to be an issue because of, and why don't we try it? So you just, because you've been around so many times. And I think going back to the written communication, this is where a lot of PMs do get into trouble, when they haven't gone into it in the detail and the diligence they need to go to. You need a reputation for a person that's got attention to detail. So if you're putting out an ambiguous document, you're just in a whole world of assumptions and miscommunication. It's a critical skill. It's an absolute critical skill to learn.
Absolutely. And like what you said there, assumptions as well, they're such a key part to it. Is, making sure that you've captured not only your own assumptions at the start of the project, but actually your project team and your key stakeholders. What are some of their assumptions around this? And if we had to flip them, if they're disproved, how is that going to have an impact? And so I know when I coached a number of sort of project managers, and I sort of say to them, it's so important to have that RAID log there as well, because if you are struggling to get your voice over, perhaps your project executive who should be sponsoring and champion you for whatever reason isn't, at least you have an audit trail of those risks and those issues that you've tried to raise time and time again, and it's documented there in regards to what the impact that could be should the risk sort of materialize.
I agree, and I always advise project managers, or I give them kind of a steer that your methodology isn't there just to give you the structure and help you deliver to quality. It's there to protect you. This is why you put these things in place, to protect you. It's not like you're trying to move away from responsibility, but it's there to protect you if you have been overridden with decisions.
Yeah.
That's what that's about. It's a whole big subject, isn't it?
It is. And I was about to say, we've talked just about communication today, and I was going to say I was keeping it short and snappy. So I think we'll probably have to come back, Bernadette, and we'll talk about leadership and influencing and problem solving and adaptability on another episode. Bernadette and I could talk for hours and hours, but we'll keep them short and sweet. So that's a wrap for today's episode. So if you found it helpful, or if there is a specific topic you would like us to talk about in future, please let us know. Don't forget to download the episodes so then you can listen to them wherever you are. Thanks again, Bernadette, for joining me.
You're welcome.
And it's always a pleasure, and I'll definitely have you on again.
Thank you.